Been hugely lucky in my career. I've had all sorts of brilliant roles. I think one of the ones that I loved the most, probably the one I loved the most, was when I was appointed to be managing director at Argos. And it was the first time I'd sort of had my own business, and we had 25,000 people, and our catalogue was in 2/3 of UK homes. And I really felt like I was part of something big. And it was the first time I'd had the chance to build my own business that worked the way I wanted it to work, with a priority focus on customers first, and then the next focus on the people who served the customers. And then the rest of the organization was serving the people who served the customers. And it was a fantastic chance to build my own team, and to basically grow my own customer satisfaction and grow my own colleague satisfaction at the same time. And when I left after 7 years, which I did because I had been diagnosed with MS, and I didn't really feel like leading a really big organization was great at that time. I was so sorry to go. It was like leaving your favorite family members behind, because I'd always felt like I was, just part of a family. And that was a role where I really felt my purpose at work and my own values really aligned, and I could shape something that I could be personally proud of as well as professionally proud of. When I became a non-executive and I was looking around for organizations to join, and I wanted to be with a financial services organization. I'd loved financial services organizations when I'd done it earlier in my career. I really felt like customers were not getting a good service, if I'm honest, from most of the UK financial sector. And I had the opportunity to join Lloyds Bank, which was really special for me because it was the biggest UK high street bank, and it had 27 million customers. And I knew that if I could help it to do a great job for customers, then the rest of the sector would have to keep up with Lloyds. So I felt like it was a chance for me to, as a non-exec, the beautiful thing is you get to focus on the thing that you're good at, and other people focus on the things they're good at. So I could really concentrate my efforts on thinking about customers, colleagues, culture, conduct, and how we built trusting relationships with customers after the financial crash, where basically everybody had lost complete confidence in the bank. So it was a chance for me. It was my first chance as an exec to do the stuff I really felt I was great at from my 30 years of executive career, which was all this stuff about how do you focus on customers, how do you get an organization through its people to focus on customers, and how do you get the right outcomes for those customers. So it's been the base for loads of stuff I've done afterwards. I worked on the board at DWP. I was now chair the Money and Pension Service at MAPS, all of which are really focused on financial inclusion. And I had my first taste of that really when I was at Lloyds. And we did some amazing things. I mean, Lee Smith, who's obviously the founder of Impact Match, and I did some incredible things whilst we were at Lloyds. I really look back on it with great pride. The place that enabled me to create the most impact directly was when I was on the board of both Lloyds Banking Group and DWP, because one of the things I did there was only doable if you sort of had a good relationship with both, if that makes sense. So when I went out to visit my first job centre when I joined DWP first, I met a lady who said to me, "You need to fix something for us." And I said, "Oh, what's that then?" And she said, "Well, we are rolling out universal credit. Unlike its predecessors, you have to have a basic bank account to get universal credit paid into. In the old world, you could have stuff paid in the post office. That wasn't going to be the case anymore. So you had to have a basic bank account, which all the banks in town, in theory, should be selling." And she said, "What happens is when we've got people with poor ID, so no passport or no driving license or no home address, we send them down to the bank to get a basic bank account, and the bank sends them back. And then we send them to a different bank, and the bank sends them back because they don't have the right ID, and therefore the bank doesn't feel confident to give them a bank account." So I said, okay, so that's quite difficult because that's actually going to require changing the way we think about money laundering, which is why the banks are saying this. They need to know who a person is before they allow them to process money through their bank account. But I see what you're saying, and I'll take that way. And I was really, it was early days, and I was determined to solve this. I thought, oh, this is not going to be too hard. I just need to talk to the right people. actually, it took me 2 solid years of working, particularly with a guy called Paul Davis in Lloyd's, who was part of our retail fraud team, who was just outstanding. And he worked diligently with a guy from DWP to find a solution. The solution they found was that DWP had to verify people before they could put them into universal credit. So the bank, we had a solution where the bank was allowed to access that bit of verification for the purpose of creating a bank account for this person. So it was quite intricate. We basically said to the rest of the industry, this is going to be the solution. This is what you need to do. But all of them didn't want to play, frankly. And I went to the Secretary of State and said, can you write to all the other banks to tell them basically they need to be doing this? So we did, but actually they were still dragging their feet. And so I said, well, Lloyd's will come in, but we'll only do it for 3 months. And if nobody else has come to join us in 3 months, we're going to roll back, because this is really quite a big section of people who are quite difficult to serve. So we don't really want to be doing it on our own. But, the fortunate thing was we pressed the button and Lloyd's went, leap of faith. And then Barclays and Nationwide came across the hill next. And then pretty much the rest of the industry came. In fact, I see some of them now advertising it as such a great proposition. I'm going, well, that's mine, hang on. But, it's great to see it being adopted. And that now becomes the way in which we help people with poor data to get a basic bank account, which is the pathway to getting universal credit, which is obviously rolling out to millions of people across the UK. So for me, that was a brilliant way to create impact, but it was also something that could only be done by somebody who understood both sides of the story and could find people who trusted them to work on it from both sides. So yeah, so it was great being on the board of DWP. There was so much you could do, but that was a particular highlight for me. In a funny sort of way, it's not in my career in the way a lot of people would define that, but it did draw on the goodwill I'd built up through my whole career. So I think the proudest moment was when I was moving into a wheelchair for the first time. I've had multiple sclerosis now for 16, 17 years, and it's progressive. So there was a point at which I had to transfer into a wheelchair, which was back in the summer of 2022. And I was obviously quite worried about the transfer because it sort of felt like the end of the world a bit. I really gave up on the ability to walk at that stage. And so I decided to do something that would sort of put me into a more positive mindset, as it were. So I decided to take part in the London Marathon and raise money for MS research, because obviously MS is my condition. And so I was going to I was going to wheel the marathon in April 23. And I accumulated a small group of people that I'd worked with over the years who I knew were well connected, but I knew also really understood me and what I wanted to do. And between us, we managed to raise the incredible sum of £262,000 for multiple sclerosis, which was the biggest single fundraiser that multiple sclerosis had ever had. It went into their Stop MS campaign, but it was also one of the biggest amounts of money raised by a single person in the London Marathon that year. So, and when I look back on it, I think when I started, I probably thought, well, if I could raise £25,000, that would be brilliant. But actually, once it got going, and we sort of then set ourselves a target of £250,000. So, and we got to 62,000 in the end. And so that was just finishing the London Marathon, knowing that that's what we'd achieved. I mean, it's a marvelous day anyway. It's a huge event. So just taking part was fantastic. But, the pride to feel like we'd done it, it was a single point thing. And that money was going in to fund research that would help people younger than me who come into the MS experience, that the chance for them of some sort of recovery and reparation for their damage, I think, felt like the one thing I could do at this stage to help others who had the same condition. So yeah, so that was, and it was a fabulous time and a really proud moment to cross the line. The big story here has to be the ActionAble conference that Lee Smith and I organised in the February of 2025, because when we started to have that conversation, I was imagining a smaller conference, which was much less complicated. But as we talked about the impact we were trying to create and the problem we were trying to solve, which was that lots of big organizations say a lot about disability inclusion, but don't actually do very much, and that we wanted a conference that was focused on actions, and we wanted a conference that was tailorable by the individuals, because what we knew was that different businesses have different problems and need different solutions to fill out the gaps in their action plan. So it wasn't any good for us to run a conference, even if it was a really big conference, we'd just have one row of speakers, because, you know, if we had 6 speakers, then only 2 of them would apply to any individual company. So why would people come? So in the end, we built this really complex solution, which had a prior assessment of what your gaps are, a conference which enabled you to pick and choose the pieces to fit into your action plan, and then a tool to help you go away with something actionable. And I think what I learned about impact was I learned a lot from working with Lee and watching the process of building an event that would deliver significant impact. And we had at the end 80% of people saying the confidence to influence their business to become more inclusive had been significantly increased. And so what I saw was that impact comes when you match carefully a problem to a solution and you focus on action, not words. And it was such a big learning for me. In the end, we had 450 organizations, including nearly half of the FTSE, 45% of the FTSE 100 signed up to access the material. So, you know, it had a scope and a scale I would never have envisaged at the beginning, and scared me at many points through the process. I took a deep breath and go, are we really sure we want to do this? But actually we ended up with, you know, 64 speakers, the very best people talking about the issues and the solutions. So I just learned the scale of ability to make an impact, but also the need to be ambitious with yourself if you actually want to create something new and different. So yeah, it's like taking, you know, a couple of tots of Dutch courage with Lee, really, because she tries for things that I would never have dreamed of trying for, and as a result creates impact that I would never have dreamed of being able to make. Well, I have one piece of and it is strategic advice, although it's not strategic advice of the McKinsey Bain type. The one thing I share with people a lot is a way of thinking about how you lead towards a vision. And the way I talk about it with people is I say, the vision is what I call a fairy tale castle on the hill. So imagine yourself standing on one side of the valley and looking over the other side of the valley, and there's a fairy tale castle. And it's got turrets and it's got flags, it's got a big portcullis, it's shiny. It looks like somewhere where everybody would want to be. And it's something I can describe to people. So that's stage one, of setting my strategy. I've got to build a fairy tale castle. People have to understand where we're going and why it's good. Second step is I then say to people, build some train tracks that get you from where you are today over to the fairy tale castle. So these will be strands of activity, pieces of work that you're going to do that are going to get you from here to there. And then the last thing I say to people is put stations on the line so people know where they are in the process. When I was small, I used to occasionally go to London with my grandma. And what she used to do is write down every stage of the journey, every station that we were going to pass through. So Weymouth, Upwey, Dorchester, Wareham, onto Bournemouth, Bournemouth, and then on our way up Woking and so on until we get to London. Because that stopped me constantly saying, are we nearly there yet? So she'd give me my bit of paper and I'd go, oh, that last station was Upwey, so this is where we are on the journey. And that is what we need to do when we lead people. We paint a big, a really clear picture of where they want to go. We tell them how we're going to get there, and then we tell them how we're getting on. And we keep reminding them where we're going, what the tracks are, where we are on the stations. And if something goes wrong, we divert our tracks a bit, but we still want to go to Fairy Tale Castle. So we reset ourselves, we look to the future and we go, that's where I'm going. I'll just do it a slightly different way. Leading is not that difficult. And I think there's a lot of junk talked about it, actually. As individuals, all we want from our leaders, really, primarily, is to know where we're going and to believe that it's a good place to be going, to know the train tracks we're supposed to be taking and to know where we are and get credit as we pass each station on the way. And I love the analogy because however many McKinsey and Bain slides you see, you probably forget them the following day. I like to think that once people know about the Fairy Tale Castle, it's not easy to forget. It's just really easy to remember, and it will teach you 80% of what you need to know about being a good people leader. So yeah, so that's the one I share a lot. I shared at ActionAble 25, and I talked to all sorts of leadership teams, from quite junior leaders coming to their first job right the way through to senior people. It's a great model to use, I think. The most important thing for me when you're delivering stuff at scale is you can only do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you want to have impact that goes beyond that, you have to engage other people in helping. And I know it sounds simple, but I remember when I took my first leadership job, and I was used to running quite small, highly professional teams of people who didn't really need much leading, if I'm honest. There were half a dozen of them. They got on with their own stuff. So suddenly I had a big team of, well, to me, a big team at that time of about a couple of hundred people. And for the first year, I went through and I learned, I went into banking. I'd never been in financial services before. I talked to loads of customers to understand the sector, built an amazing strategy for the brand, took it to the board and sold it to the board. And after about a year, I took some 360 feedback from my team. And the team said, it's really great. We love the vision. We love the energy. We'd really like to be able to help. And I went, what do you mean? They go, well, we'd like you to give us some indication of what you'd like to do, what you'd like us to do to support the strategy. And I'm going, well, you mean you're not behind me, sort of fixing it for yourselves, working out, you see where I'm going, if you're not built the plans? And they go, no, we're waiting for you to tell us how you'd like to divide it up. And this was a shock to me, because I'd worked in an organization where I didn't have to tell anybody who worked for me what to do. They were likely to be in front of me with their elbows out going, I want to be at the front of the team. So all of a sudden I realized that actually if I wanted to achieve a lot, I needed all the people who worked for me, and then lots of people beyond them probably, to actually come with me on the journey. And the only way I could do that would be to articulate where we were going, how we were going to get there, and to do it in an easily absorbable way, and to do it consistently over time. And when I've seen really great leaders, one of the things they do is they build simple stories out of complex problems, and they share those stories consistently, time and time and time again. And when they get sick of doing it, it's quite likely that the people they're sharing their stories with will just be beginning to realize what it is that you're asking them to do. So my big learning, I think, about leading change is that you can only deliver it at scale if you have lots of other people aligning to help you. And you can only get that if you can keep the message simple, distill it to something that makes sense to people who are not in your head trying to understand the complexity. They're out there trying to absorb the message and say, what do I do with this? Keep it simple, be consistent, talk to it over time, link it into everything you're doing, keep going back to it, because you might have it all clear in your head, but in your head, it's not clear to other people in theirs. So yeah, so I think that's my big thing about leading change, is you achieve lots more if you can take lots of people with you. They'll only come with you if you can articulate where you're going and why. Keep it simple and do it consistently, and people will join in. One of the things often people say to me is, oh, you're very inspiring. And I always say to them, you can only be inspired by me or anybody else if you choose to be. Because lots of people can listen to what I do and say and not be inspired at all. That's their choice. So I get inspired by lots of people, but I think the people that inspire me most to do things to create impact, which is stuff I mostly do in disability inclusion and financial inclusion. Those are my two worlds, I think. And I think the people who inspire me most, let me pick out one lady. There's a lady called Kate Nash, who may or may not be familiar to people, but Kate was the starter of an organization called Purple Space, who support employee resource groups all over the world now, actually. And I love Kate because she's lived with her significant disabling condition since she was very young. And she's been through all the iterations of fighting for legal rights with people with disabilities, fighting for the Disability Discrimination Act. And she has stayed all the way through that as a super optimistic, positive person. She always believes that there is a way to make the world a better place. And she is glass half full at all times, not ignoring the difficulties of her disability, or indeed the difficulties for the rest of us with disabilities. She doesn't play them down, but what she does still hang on to is a belief that we can create change and it can be a better world and a better environment for people with disabilities. And that's, for me, that's what's inspired me. Try to find the positive in the stories, encourage people to be caught doing things right, not criticize people for where they haven't yet sorted their problems, but just recognize that people are doing it right and trying to share that positivity, hold up those. And that's what ActionAble was about. It wasn't a criticism of anybody. It was an enabling conference that allowed people to come and find out how to do things better. And Kate's been my inspiration for that, really. Collaboration. Funnily enough, when I got my first job as a graduate trainee, I applied to lots of businesses and I took lots of second interviews and I got lots of job offers. The one job offer I didn't get was from an organization who said they thought I was too competitive, too individualistic, not a good enough team player, which, looking back, I agree with. I mean, I was, I'd come out of academia, I'd been, smart at school, smart at university. Everything I'd done on my own, off my own bat. And so they were probably right when I started work. I was too individualistic. But one of the things I have learnt over the years, and I do think it comes with time a bit, is a bit like leading, where you get much more output if you can engage lots of other people in your journey, people that work for you. I also feel that you only really get powerful solutions if you do it by joining across systems. And that means you have to be willing to put necessarily your own specific objectives on the slightly back burner in the desire to do something that works at a grander scale. And I think I went through a process of going from being an individual to being a collaborator within my organization, to being a collaborator across organizations, in steps of learning. But I have to say, I've been doing the latter for so long now that collaboration has become my go-to first style. So the first thing I do when I see a problem is think about who else could I share the problem with in order to get a better solution. And what I've found is that the network of people that I've built up across financial inclusion, digital inclusion, and disability inclusion is an incredibly powerful network now, which when somebody brings me a problem, I can nearly always go, oh, I need that bit of the network, and we'll need that bit as well, and we'll need to have those people in with us as well. And you just get, A, so much better solutions, but B, you work with such amazing people all the time. And so that's been the absolute pleasure for me, is that gradually I've got to a position where I'm working with, it might be the best engineers at the water company, it might be the best bankers in the world, the best academics at Cambridge, the best social impact movers, people like Lee, who are creating real change in the system. And actually, that's what my day is populated with, talking to people to work out how what they know and what I know can come together to make a better answer. And that is pure work joy, really. Like many people, I use several quotes to inspire me. But one of the early ones, I think, that changed my direction is a little cartoon of a Zen dog. And it says, he knows not where he's going, for the ocean will decide. It's not the destination, it's the glory of the ride. And I think for me, that turned my head from a perfectionist who wanted to get to the end solution to a realist who understands that the world is a complex place and that big changes are difficult to achieve. And if you only highlight the end goal and give yourself credit for the destination in the ride, then you will get quite quickly demoralized, because the end destination is so far away and so unachievable that you start to lose the will to try to fight for it. the beauty of it's not the destination, it's the glory of the ride, is it gives you the chance to welcome and understand the progress you make on the journey and give yourself credit for that. And for me, I was pretty much a perfectionist who wanted to get to the ultimate solution. And so, you know, the circumstances in which I came across that particular quote were quite difficult personally. And it was a very formative stage where I could look at that and go, actually, I need to stop being that much of a perfectionist. I need to accept that if I'm going to tackle issues of this scale, then I'm going to have to give myself credit as we make the journey, because otherwise the destination will be too far away and I won't be able to enthuse myself. But equally, I won't be able to enthuse other people either, because asking them delayed pleasure to say, you only get credit, guys, when we get to the other far side of the hill, most of the people won't bother to make the journey because they'll just go, it's too difficult. And I've got to get some value from what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. So that, yeah, so the Zen dog, he knows not where he's going, but the ocean will decide. It's not the destination, it's the glory of the ride.